All right, what's going on, everybody? We are live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. We've got the usual guys here. Matthew Fox right below me. You can follow at Nighthawk7734. Dennis to my right there. Follow at Culture_Coach. And then right below Dennis, we've got our special guest, Mr. Bob Harris from Footballdiehards. He is the senior editor. He's one of the original members starting out on the TFL report, host of Football Diehards on Sirius XM Radio. He is a member of the FSW Hall of Fame, won the very prestigious award of Writer of the Year in the FSWA in 2005. Bob, what is going on? Thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
That took a long time. I gotta shorten that up somehow.
No, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's a lot of accomplishments.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. We are thrilled to have you here.
My description of me is just as long. It just has a lot more filler.
Yeah, mine's a lot.
I wrote half of that, didn't I?
All right, Bob. So when we usually have a guest come on here, we like to get their background a little bit on what they or how they got involved in fantasy, how long they've been doing it. So give us a little bit of background. How long have you been in fantasy football? How did you get started in this business?
I got started in this business. I started playing in 1986. A friend brought moved to San Diego, an engineer friend, and moved back to where my hometown, Tucson, and came up to our little group of friends, and he said, "You guys, I found this thing, and you're going to love it." And we did. It was fantasy football, and it took about 3 days for me to realize into the playing of the fantasy football that I didn't have the information I needed to play the fantasy football. So kind of just an ongoing goal was I was a graphic designer and, started doing a little newsletter for my league mates called the TFL Report. We were called the Tucson Fantasy League, and eventually turned that into a business in 1993. And I've been gainfully or not employed doing that since that very day. So like most things, I'm a little ahead of the curve. I think in another 3 or 4 years, I will break even on this whole endeavor. But, it's been a long, fun, role, and meeting great people along the way has been a big part of it. I mean, everyone who's into fantasy, we all kind of, ride the same vibes and everything. And it's just, it's a really good time. And being in the business is a blast as well. So I've been pretty fortunate the way things have worked out.
That is awesome. Do you have a favorite format? Being playing as long as you have a favorite format?
I love them all equally. I mean, I don't want to cop out, but I mean, it's just, I love all of fantasy, the whole of fantasy, every piece of it, and all the pieces seem to, as we've gone along. I mean, obviously, when I first started playing, it was just a standard format, and as we've progressed into PPR and IDP and DFS, Dynasty, all the pieces kind of fit together in a way that complement each other. If you just played in a standard redraft format, when Dynasty came along, you go, oh, wow, this is like where I really, when you got into fantasy, the whole idea was, I'm smarter than that GM. I'm smarter than that coach. You're watching football. Well, Dynasty obviously took that to another level. And then DFS comes along and starts filling in the things that you hate about season long are all kind of rectified by day. Lousy draft. So what? New draft. Injuries, whatever, anything, attrition, no problem. I've got DFS. So I love them all. I play in all of them quite a bit, and probably way more than I should. Which means I'm lousy at all of them, but I have a blast being lousy at all of them.
I can understand you on that part. I'm being in way too many. You've got to have one format you don't like as much as the others, right? Like touchdown only, standard. There's got to be that one that. I mean,
I suppose that's kind of turned into the redheaded stepchild of fantasy football. I mean, as we've advanced over time, that's kind of fallen by the wayside. I still play in a handful of those leagues, and look, I mean, anything less than 12-team dynasty full IDP kind of is, seems to fall a little short. And look, I'm not like the IDP expert, but I do love the level, the added level of playing that. And I think probably if you, pin me down, slap me awake at 3 a.m. and shook me vigorously, I would probably say dynasty IDP. But I do love them all. There's nothing I don't like about fantasy football.
All right, fair enough. Do you have a favorite team or player?
I hate them all equally. And as when you cover, I mean, number one, we all learned early on, not that to play your favorites, but I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. We didn't have a team and everyone who lived in Tucson other than me that I knew. I mean, I was born there, but most people move there, and they bring with them their allegiances to teams. My team's the Chiefs. My team. I didn't have that, and I kind of became a badge of honor for me not having a team. And then when I got into the business of covering teams and the news of teams, I realized how much I hate every single team. So any given week, my favorite team is the least complicated team. I kind of make the joke, ask a dishwasher what their favorite pot is, right? It's the cleanest one to start out with. And that's kind of how it is with teams. Whatever's least complicated and the easiest to figure out, I tend to like those kind of things. But in terms of loving a team, I don't love any of them. I admire what they all do greatly, and I like to make use of their players, but I have no allegiances.
All right, fair enough. That's the one thing you have over the three of us on this podcast. We are all, especially me and this guy right below me, we tend to draft with our heart on our favorite teams way too much, and it tends to cost us a little bit too much as well.
Yeah, and we all see that. I mean, I don't know. There's always that guy, in every draft. I cover for Sirius the Alice in Chains draft every year, and Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses is known to draft Seattle's kicker in the second round. And I mean, more power to him, and everyone else appreciates that. But there's always that guy, right?
Well, it's really hard to hide when your avatar is like Drew Lock in a throwback Broncos jersey. It's not hard to guess who you're going for.
So you have to be very excited.
I am.
Lots of pieces.
There's only one bad piece on that team.
No, well, let's not get into that right now. We spent enough time talking about that. So I know you do a ton of DFS stuff. What are some of your favorite strategies to use when you're setting your DFS lineups?
So I'm not a huge fan of 50-50 or head-to-head. I mean, I'll do that, and I'm not sitting around building my bankroll. I'm not Jeff Mans. I am a guy who, when I get off the air with Jeff Mans on Sunday mornings and sit down into my red zone, and I like to have a handful of GPP lottery tickets in my hand. And that's, to me, that may be my favorite part about football, is sitting around. And so, look, I use a variety of strategies, piece it together. I pay a lot of attention to the matchup, pay a lot of attention to Vegas, like everyone does. I mean, there's guys out there, that do a lot of the work for you. And, and try to play values. I'll have one lineup every week that is a totally contrarian lineup. It's a total waste of money, but I do it anyway. So, I mean, mostly it's just focusing on the matchups, the various games, targeting certain games, looking to, for maybe unique stacks and things like that. But for the most part, it's all GPP and as many as I can buy in a day. And I don't care how much it costs me at the end of the year. It's almost like the Tom Brady golf shot, right? I mean, all you need is one, all season long. And I usually get that one, maybe a few more than one. That make it all very exciting, but I love that aspect of watching games with watching your DraftKings and FanDuel and watching everything, watching all your lineups, how they're doing. That just is that's a thrill.
I hate to break off the fantasy football talk really quick. What are the guitars in your background?
We have a Jackson Dinky, and we have a Yamaha Strat with a Floyd Rose tremolo that I love. It's like that guitar I've had it for a long time. It's never been out of tune, ever. Jackson's fast, but tuning a little bit of issue. There's also a big drum kit in the other room. I'll take you in there next time we do this.
Okay. Cool.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on around here.
Yeah, I've noticed them, so I thought I'd ask really quick. So in talking about the DFS strategies, one that I tend to use, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too, so I want to get your thoughts on it, is the QB wide receiver stack. I feel like that's kind of a big thing that a lot of people like to use. Obviously, it's still very early. We've got a lot of stuff that's got to play out in the 2020 season. But just off the top of your head, what would be your top 5 QB wide receiver stacks you would think would be the best for fantasy in 2020?
So I'm going to throw out the Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, however you want to package that together, because you probably can't afford it. Or if you can, you're going to wish you hadn't. So I'll go Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown. I think Marquise Brown on the verge of a super good year. And here's why. Because remember this time last year what the coaches in Baltimore were saying about Lamar Jackson? This guy's going to change the way the game works. All these, you don't often hear coaches talk like they're saying the same thing about Marquise Brown right now. And so that has my attention. I think they'll throw the ball. Look, they'll throw the ball enough. Beyond that one seems a little obvious. I like Ben Roethlisberger, Juju Smith-Schuster. I think Smith-Schuster's in for a rebound. There's some weapons around him, but Big Ben coming back. Kyler Murray and Christian Kirk, I think, is maybe a good play this year. DeAndre Hopkins is the more obvious play, and I'll be playing plenty of that, but I'm trying to keep it affordable. Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller is like dope. I can't stay away. You can, as long as Will Fuller's on the field and locked in upright position, that locked-in connection he's had with Deshaun Watson over the course of his healthy, brief, though they be, periods is hard for me to pass up. And I think the one that I like an awful lot is Daniel Jones, Darius Slayton. That's kind of a little bit lower down the run. But I'm, in best ball, that's something I'm diving in with both feet. I think, just watching he's a perfect best ball player, and he'll be a perfect tournament player too.
Yeah, I love Slayton and Daniel Jones. I did a startup earlier and grabbed Daniel Jones as the QB8 in a Superflex startup. I was drafting with Rich Dotson, who's the president of the Daniel Jones fan club. And so I knew if I was going to get him, that was where I was going to have to take him, was there at the beginning of the second round. And Slayton's breakout last year, is he going to lead the Giants in targets this year? Do you think that's they've got Shepard, they've got Tate, they've got Ingram?
I don't know. And one of the things I'm noticing is he's no longer the cheapest of the three options. And often, especially in best ball, if there's a couple guys on one team or three guys or whatever, I'll just take the cheapest option. Thank you very much. And he's turning not into that. So I'll probably have some other options that I didn't, that I wasn't keen on. I mean, I think Sterling Shepard will be a fine play going in. Baker Odell, I like that too.
It's a very self-serving user comment.
Is kind of drawing a little more attention. So I don't know if he's going to get that, if the value is going to be as much as I hoped for. But I'm still liking it at the moment.
He will be after week 1 when Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard return to their natural state, which is injured.
I'm going to ask for my fellow co-host here. What are your thoughts on the Drew Lock, Cortland Sutton duo there? A lot of people like Sutton. Could he be someone that you think could have a couple really good weeks, especially with Lock there?
Right. I think, look, obviously that whole offense there is going to be so. I wish they had not diluted it, too much. I mean, the addition of Melvin Gordon, the additional pieces at wideout, another tight end, Alfred O shows up. So, look, it's good news for Drew Lock, and I think he is a guy that I'm drafting very late in best ball right now. For that reason, I liked what I saw late last season. I don't know if that's enough to hang my hat on as a consistent starter in redraft kind of formats. But in best ball, hell yeah, all day long. And I love Cortland Sutton, one of the many guests on the Football Diehard show over the course of time. And once you've been on my show, I can't let you go. I love you forever.
That is awesome. I bet that makes Matt just a little bit jealous. He is a huge, huge fan of Cortland Sutton, as we all are here. We all love Cortland.
Really, sometimes you get a little bit of insight into these guys. Obviously for the most part, they're trying to be very cautious. And when someone is not and someone seems really genuine, it really stands out to you. And he was one of those guys that really came off well. Jonathan Taylor this year as well, too, was another guy that really came off well, who I'm wildly overpaying for every opportunity I get.
Well, I'm going to break off here again. Who are some of your other favorites that you've had a chance to interview outside of those two, Sutton and Taylor?
Oh, so many guys. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott was great. Melvin Gordon, great interview. Over the course of time. I mean, talked to him a couple times, and you want to talk about a guy who is not, when you see him, you're going, what the hell happened to him? He is as jacked up as any player you will ever see in terms of the working of the body. Rashad Penny's always great. Or Rashad Jennings is a great guy and a similar guy. There's so many that some of those guys stand out a little bit. My favorite interview of all time that I did for one of our Fan Sports Publications magazines was Steve Smith, who was quite a character. You see him now on NFL Network. He was just as much before. And probably my best interview of all time, or my favorite of all time. And look, I've talked to LaDainian Tomlinson, Sean Alexander. I mean, I've talked to some really great players. But Larry Johnson was phenomenal. And it was when he was with the Chiefs. He was he was coming on. Dick Vermeil had just got there, and he was just phenomenal. And he really understood the fantasy at the time when a lot of players didn't. He kind of realized, look, the fantasy football is what makes a Chicago Bears fan a Larry Johnson fan or a Philadelphia Eagle fan. And, there's been other players, one in particular, Jake Plummer, I was set to interview, and he was literally driving up the street, said, okay, you got 3 minutes. I'm going to my chiropractor appointment, and I'll give you 3 minutes. I'm just thinking, oh, man, I'm doomed. And he ended up sitting in the parking lot of his chiropractor for an hour and a half talking, and it ended up being really great. So a lot of guys over the years, a lot of guys I have not enjoyed talking to, and as well, for the most part, some of them for obvious reasons. And some of them you just have an instinct about. Kellen Winslow Jr. was a guy that just gave me I just felt like I wanted to take a shower after I was done. Turned out, he was
a good instinct there.
Yeah, you just get an impression of guys. Braylon Edwards too was a similar guy to me, but just in terms of talking, but just a ton of fun over the years talking to all these players and getting their feel for fantasy. Not all of them have been on board. Some of them more so than others. It's always interesting to see how that works.
So are the players, are they becoming a lot more accepting of the fantasy industry and how it drives the fandom and starting to embrace it a lot more?
Yeah, I think most of them are. I mean, there's always going to be the kind of old school guys that, I don't care about your fantasy team. And they don't on Sunday. And they don't want you to at them on Twitter on Sunday after they've lost a game or whatever. But for the most part, they do realize, it seems to me that they all want to be basketball players, right? They all want to have their helmet off. They all want everyone to see them and know their faces and know about them. And I think fantasy, they realize for the most part, gives them that opportunity.
Yeah, it's always weird to me that people at the players.
Matt F., I can't hear you, Matt Fox.
Can you
wonder if his internet locked up maybe. He was asking.
I can see him moving.
Can you hear me now?
He seems like he's there. I just can't hear him. He might have to log out and log in. I think this happened to me with someone last night. I don't know why.
So, well, we'll move on with the show sheet then. So you mentioned IDP, and we're big IDP fans, Matt Bruning and myself. So do you think IDP is going to make the transition over to DFS at all, or is DFS just going to stick with the keep it simple, stupid?
I think eventually all things happen. I think this is going to run its course and it will happen in time. I just think, they're always looking for something new. And at some point, DFS is going to realize that. And I think we're going to get into eventually in-game substitutions and all kinds of things over the course of time. But I would imagine we would have IDP well in advance of things like in-game substitutions becoming the norm. So yeah, I do expect it.
Yeah, I was watching Emil's interview with Cynthia Friedland for the Fantasy Football Pioneers, and he was talking about, and she was talking about the in-game substitutions for if a player gets injured, make a swap at halftime.
Yeah, I think I've been talking about that since 1998. And, now, we're getting there with the technology. The next gen stats all run off the chip and, in the pads, and we know how many plays guys are on the field for, where they're lining up. And I think we'll be able to track things closely enough to make that work at some point.
Well, and you did say you were ahead of your time, so.
Yes.
So moving off DFS and moving just more toward regular fantasy, whether it's dynasty, redraft, however you want to put it. We all like to have variety in our lineups. I'm sure you are in a ton of leagues. Being in the industry, I'm sure you get asked probably dozens of times a day to get into certain leagues. I'm sure you're in your fair amount. Who are some of the players that you have a ton of stock in that you truly buy into? You really think that they're going to be good every single year?
We'll start with Daniel Jones, Darius Slayton, and almost to the point already where I'm feeling overweight on him. There's going to come a point where all these guys I'm about to talk about probably I will start running away from, right? You just get to that point. Even last year I had so many first-round picks, and I was just Saquon Barkley, and then all of a sudden you're realizing, man, what if something happens as it did? So I love Chris Carson this year. I have a ton of him. I know Carlos Hyde shows up, but just that coaching staff has been relentless in using him regardless of the circumstances, whether he's fumbling, whether he's 100% healthy, whether Rashad Penny is 100% healthy or not. And I think, maybe they'll mix some other guys in, but I think for the most part, and I think the value is there for him. And look, I was going after Le'Veon Bell, not because I think he's going to turn back into Le'Veon Bell, but the improved offensive line and the previously clear path to workload. Something you will hear me talk about a lot if you pay attention to me is clear path to workload, or something I'm drafting this time of year because we don't know what's going on. Then all of a sudden we have Frank Gore show up. So the clear path is less clear, so I'm dialing back on him, but still have a ton of them. Have a ton of Devontae Parker. Have a ton of AJ Green just because he is dirt cheap. And maybe I don't have great expectations for Joe Burrow, but I do think if I'm getting AJ Green in round 6 or 7, it's just hard for me to pass up at that point, even at his age. I have a ton of Mark Andrews, and I'm going to have a ton of Hayden Hurst before all is said and done. Just a good value. The Dirk Cutter targeting of tight ends is goes back to Tony Gonzalez and has carried on throughout all his stops. So I think Hayden Hurst is in a good position.
So by association with Hurst, what do you think happens with Hooper in Cleveland? I'm pretty down on him compared to last year. I just don't see it happening for him this year. I
feel like I'm with you. There's a lot of targets there. I know we've already had some Odell Beckham fans chiming in. I'm not an Odell Beckham fan either. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. Look, I like Kevin Stefanski. So if I want a piece of that offense, it's Nick Chubb. And I know people are worried about Kareem Hunt, and I get that. But, I think maybe enough Gary Kubiak rubbed off on Stefanski during their time together in Minnesota that he'll understand the benefit of a true feature back hammering the ball. And I think if you look at the numbers for Chubb, I just think he's a much better back than he's given credit for. I know a lot of people really like him. A lot of people don't. And a lot of that is a concern about Kareem Hunt. I think both guys can coexist in this offense, and maybe they'll be the driving force in this offense than the high-end receiving core who will, certainly do their damage. Like Odell wasn't horrible last year playing hurt. He just, expecting him to have those huge seasons and drafting him like that seems like a reach. And I think Hooper is going to be lost in the wash. That's just my feeling.
Yeah, Odell can't seem to win. I think everybody, the expectation of him is just so high that if he doesn't come out and catch 12 touchdown passes and 1,600 yards, people are like, oh, see, he's just not that good. Jarvis Landry caught 100 passes at 9.5 yards a pop. Exaggeration. But he can't win, Odell.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think a lot of it, Odell, too, is that he just didn't get the touchdowns last year. I mean, he still had a good season. It was just he only had the 2 touchdowns. So for fantasy, we look at it as he had a disappointing year, but in NFL standards, he still had a good season. We need him to score those touchdowns. You mentioned that you were possibly looking to move guys like Daniel Jones and Slayton because you have so much of them. So who are some guys that you're trying to get back now? Like, who are those guys that you want to buy stock in that you don't have?
Christian McCaffrey, does he count? No.
Everybody wants him. Yeah.
Look, I mean, I want to get a few first picks. I want a few shares of McCaffrey. I don't see the workload diminishing greatly. I don't know why you run the wheels off him. Beyond that, I do want some Jonathan Taylor at the right price. I have overpaid for him in some drafts I've been in. And I like to quit overpaying for him and have him a good price. Not that Marlon Mack is a bad back. I just think that Taylor is so well suited to what the Colts want to do behind that road grading offensive line. And he's just a big, fast, big play threat. And I like the landing spot for him, especially in Dynasty. I'm all about that. I know Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're there too. I hear you, man. But I think those are some guys I'm trying to get in on. I think the guys I really want, I mean, it comes down to draft position, right? If I'm drafting those first 4 or 5 picks, I would love to get so much Dalvin Cook. You think about him, and I mentioned Gary Kubiak, and you think over the course of history, I'm old enough to remember the Reuben Bruins of the world, the Olandis Garys, the Mike Andersons. I mean, he just turned in. You go to Houston, and I mean, you could name just Steve Slayton, a whole range of guys, before you even get to Arian Foster that he's turned into stars. So when you see a guy like Dalvin Cook that will be running that offense, it's, I'm really into some of that. I like Joe Mixon a heck of a lot. I'm not getting him because I think most of the drafts I've been drafting like 9, 10 or later. So I'm just not getting some of the guys I'm really keen on. And, I've been talking about this a little bit recently. I feel like, and maybe you guys can, chime in on this as well, whether it's the odd off season or the lack of, those tidbits we're getting of who's developing chemistry with who and who looks quick doing this or that or the other. I'm having a hard time cracking the code, finding the combination, especially drafting late. I'm really feel unsatisfied maybe with my first 3 rounds. I'm getting good players, but I don't know that I have the kind of confidence in them I would have with the earlier guys. And even in the drafts where I'm getting earlier players, I'm coming back around in the second round and I'm feeling, it's not until like I get into the 4th, 5th rounds that I feel like, okay, now it's starting to come together and I'm starting to feel really comfortable with the values I'm getting. So that may come in time. But a lot of the guys that I want are player. Every time I pick Aaron Jones, I think, God, why did I buy a bucket of regression? Or Kenyon Drake. I mean, what if he turns back into Kenyon Drake? I don't have the level of confidence that I have in some other players, and so I feel a lot better drafting some guys later. Chris Carson, for example. I like him late. And if only there were a bunch of receivers and guys I felt really good about it. Some of this has ended up with me drafting quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds. Just look, I'm not about that, but it does seem like the dynamics has changed a little bit, on the whole late round quarterback thing. And I'm that guy. I'm a late round quarterback guy all the way. But man, every best ball league I won last year, I won because I drafted Lamar Jackson in round 10 or 8 or 9 as the summer grew on. And I want some pieces of that. It was exciting and fun. So, and I want some Patrick Mahomes. And if you want them, you're going to have to draft them early. So I find myself doing that just because I don't really feel comfortable with some of the guys I'm getting early right now.
Yeah, JJ Zacharyson just released his latest episode of the Late Round Quarterback.
Right.
And I haven't listened to it all, but it seems like he was talking about, yeah, that's my brand, but you have to evolve. And when you've got talent like Mahomes,
the market's changing, right?
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
Hey, before Dennis asks you his question, I want to ask you real quick. You brought up Dalvin Cook, and we were talking about Nick Chubb, and we kind of talked about both these guys on a previous episode. So if you had your choice, who would you draft, Nick Chubb or Dalvin Cook? Who do you think has the better 2020?
Dalvin Cook all day long.
Okay. Is it just because of the receiving work that he gets there in Minnesota compared to what Chubb doesn't really get in Cleveland?
Yeah, I think, look, all due respect to Alexander Mattison, I think he's a fine back when Dalvin Cook is not on the field. I don't think he's a guy that's going to cut into the workload significantly. I think they've made some additions on the outside. I don't know that those additions are going to change the passing dynamic that much. It's, I think they're going to rely heavily and maybe even more heavily on the one back on Dalvin Cook than they did even in the past. So, and I'm hoping he stays healthy. But yeah, Chubb is. I just think Chubb is totally underrated, and I love it when he falls down to that 8th, 9th spot.
Same here.
But I'm jumping all over Dalvin Cook if I'm in the top 5, and I usually have to be in the top 4.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I grabbed in the same draft that I grabbed Daniel Jones in the second, that super flex. I drafted Cook as the RB4 at 107. So I'm all in on Cook as well this year. So listening to you and Dempsey talking about your listener leagues, listener best ball drafts that you've been doing, which player has surprised you the most with their value when you're doing the drafts with the listeners? And I guess it'd be interesting to hear you contrast a little bit how listeners draft versus how the industry drafts for you.
The listeners clearly listen. Because they are sniping like crazy, man. They are hitting you right before your pick, and they know what you're going to do. And that's one of the things drafting with Dempsey, who when we're talking every single day on the radio, we're right in each other's brains. And so, we will drive ADPs up single-handedly. Hayden Hurst is in leagues we're playing and is going to have like a second-round ADP before it's all said and done, because we're just going to be sitting there fighting over him. But there are players where that happens, and so the listeners are very good. Look, I think I don't want to say, I always talk about this. They talk about fantasy experts and I think the thing about being a fantasy expert is I'll say that I am the fantasy expert to the degree everyone who listens to my show is, and everyone who reads my website is, and everyone who buys my magazine is. We all are. That's why I got in this business. And I can remember back at one of the early high stakes leagues, Emil started up the World Championship of Fantasy Football. It was in Vegas, big event. And we're standing there and see a guy standing in line to do something, and he's got one of my magazines, the Pro Forecast, in his hands. I said, so check out those rankings. Nah, I know more than these guys do. Nah, hell with that. I just like that. And you know what? He's not wrong. He may well know more than us. And so I think that our listeners in all the leagues we do with listeners, and we'll do a bunch more as we get closer to the season when we're on daily. There will be weeks where we do leagues every day, and it's endlessly amazing at how sharp these people are, and it's joyous to see it. It keeps you sharp, keeps me sharp as well.
Yeah, I love the people who ask me if I put out misinformation so that people I'm drafting with will not do something, and I'm like, if somebody's listening to me, like last year, I had people taking Preston Williams in rookie drafts a round higher than I was on him because they knew they knew if they waited 8 more picks, they weren't going to get him. I was going to take him. They were listening to
my show. That was the guy. And we started talking about Clay Ferraro from, I think it's ABC Sports in Miami, who started coming on our show. Man, he would not quit talking about this guy. This was back in mini camps. And by the time the season was rolling up, this is the guy, this guy. I mean, he couldn't say enough. And of course, I love Devontae Parker. He's a guy I'm drafting the hell out of if I can beat Dempsey to the punch. But I think Preston Williams is a guy that should not be overlooked, especially, we all probably make a list, after the season of guys who ended up hurt or fell off the radar for whatever reason that we're really high on or we think can have rebounds. And he's certainly well placed on that list of my list of those kind of guys.
So Preston Williams and Darius Slayton, who are you taking?
I'll probably have more Slayton, but there'll come a point where when I feel like I'm way too overweight on him, I'll start pivoting to other guys, and Williams will be one of them. He's still available so late that it's a semi freebie.
I know it's crazy. So who do you think is it going to be, Parker or Williams leading the Dolphins in targets? Or yeah,
I think. Look, so Parker's a guy we've known has had the talent all along. And he just couldn't, nobody has disputed what he's capable of. It's the question has always been, is he willing to do what it takes to be that same guy that he was in college at the next level? And whether it was a change of coaching staff, hell, maybe it's just the fact that Adam Gase can't coach anybody, right? I mean, that's entirely possible, other than Peyton Manning and Julius Thomas. Maybe those are the only guys he can coach. I don't know. But
did he really even coach Peyton Manning?
The new coaching staff came in, and if you listen to people who follow the team closely, there was a lot of talk about how they kind of got him on point in terms of, everything from nutrition to sleeping habits to workout habits, things like that. And it all seemed to come together, maybe having a quarterback who's not afraid to put the ball up, didn't hurt him either and had the confidence in him. But he seems to have turned the corner. And I think, right now I'm willing to gamble on that. I think Miami will still be playing from behind a fair amount. And whichever quarterback is going to be throwing the hell out of the football.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick's not afraid of the old chuck and duck.
Nah. And look, I like other guys there too, though. I mean, I like, Jordan Howard's a guy that I'm finding late in best ball. I mean, if nothing else, he'll be a goal line back, and Matt Breed is a little bit cheaper. I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say Fitzpatrick isn't going to lead the team in rushing this year.
Oh, I don't think so. I'm all about that Jordan Howard.
Yeah, the price is right now. Breed is a couple picks later, so I could live with either. But Howard's the guy I've been leaning on. So
last year at the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo, we were chatting, and you were so committed to Leonard Fournette. Dempsey was like, "This is going to be the guy." So now they got Minshew. He's, I guess we could call him established. They didn't really bring in anybody to replace him. They got rid of Nick Foles. Minshew, though, currently at Dynasty Trade Calculators, ADP is going at 109, quarterback 24. Is he being undervalued? Gruden came out and said that he's got what it means. He's got the intangibles to be a starting quarterback. So is that coach speak? Is Minshew being undervalued?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Gardner Minshew for bringing jorts back into my life. The women in my life had disabused me of that habit of jorts, and as much as I'd like to admit I did what they told me and I threw them all away, there was still a corner of my closet that Gardner Minshew has rescued. So thank you for that, Gardner. Beyond that, I don't know. I'm not gonna go nuts. I'd rather invest in some of the pieces than in the quarterback himself. So I'll have some DJ Chark. He's another guy that I think the price is fairly good on. And I think that's more what I'm interested in Minshew. Can he fuel the fires of the guys I'm interested in? And I'm going to leave Tyler Eifert off that list, even though anyone who has ever listened to me for 2 minutes knows my interest in Tyler Eifert is endless. Can't quit him. I don't know why. But unfortunately, he's free. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of quarterbacks I would rather have than Gardner Minshew. And we'll see how this plays out. I thought it was a great run last year. I thought he played surprisingly well. And if he does it again and somebody beats my ass because of it, I will congratulate them and move on. Kind of confident in I gave it my best shot.
So in the DTC ADP, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, and Teddy Bridgewater are all going right before Minshew. You taking Minshew over any of them?
No. Well, yes, I'm taking him over Herbert. I have no interest there. Outside of Dynasty, I'm just not going to take that. There's plenty of quarterbacks out there that I'll be more interested in. Minshew would obviously be one of them. Teddy, I'm okay with, but there might come to a coin toss if I was deciding between those two. I think some of the things I like about Bridgewater are he's going to at least an offensive coordinator that he's familiar with and is familiar with him. But a lot of things that I'm doing this year are kind of trying to stay away from new situations, new coaching staffs, players in new locations, rookie wide receivers, things that, I think there's a level of uncertainty that I can avoid a little bit. And, it may cost me some high-end plays at some point, but I think for the most part, it's probably going to be a wise approach. We look every season, I talk about all the time how, September is the new August, basically, right? I mean, right. Nobody plays in the preseason and the offenses don't come together until October or so. And so, hell, this year it might be November. And the rookie wide receivers might never catch up yet this year. This might be a thing where they come on next year. Some obviously will, but I just think in general, if I'm trying to play the odds, I'm trying to back off. So Bridgewater maybe gets the slight edge because, remember, Minshew's playing with a new offense as well. So, and a coach that is not as familiar with him and has not worked with him at all hands-on. So I think that might be a hair splitter for me, and they're kind of in that range.
Well, the guys that are going right behind Minshew are Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Cam Newton, Jalen Hurts. Probably not taking Newton or Hurts.
Why?
Yeah.
I try not to take guys who aren't on teams.
Right.
I think Cam will eventually be on a team. But this is a little fantasy expert insight here. Not on teams, not interested. So until he's on a team,
hold on. Let me get something to write that down.
I'm writing that down. Right?
All about the Rivers, though. I like a shot putter on my teams. Look, he's got some good weapons around him. We've got a great rushing attack. We'll have more, protection. Again, the coaching staff, the familiarity with Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni, the offensive coordinator there, both of whom had stints with the Chargers and know him well. He understands what they're trying to do. I think it's a pretty good situation for him and some really good downfield threats, not the least of which is T.Y. Hilton. And there are other guys. I look, if I'm looking at rookie wide receivers, I think Michael Pittman Jr. landed in a good spot, right? So I just feel like I feel like that he's of those guys, of that range of guys, I would love River. But Big Ben, I think, especially in best ball, I think people are making a mistake if they're laying off him that far.
Yeah, I like Ben to bounce back this year if he stays healthy. So do you think Paris Campbell can fulfill some of that Austin Eckler role?
I feel like maybe Paris Campbell's getting a hell of a lot of buzz right now because nobody's on the field and we're in Zoom practice meetings. And that's the kind of stuff we talk about. I probably won't be investing that heavily. But look, there is, in best ball, if you're looking for cheap options at the end of drafts, I think he's in that conversation. I do think you're right, though. Somebody's going to turn to the Austin Eckler, which brings us back to Austin Eckler. It's not going to be him. So, right. And that's another problem I'm having early in drafts is, I'm just not that, I think Austin Eckler, not that I don't think he's a great player. I just wonder if he's going to get the same kind of run with Tyrod Taylor, Justin Herbert combination that he got with Phillip Rivers. And I find that hard to believe. I think there's, just like Aaron Jones, there's regression coming, maybe not in the touchdowns, but in the catches and the yardage for him. So, and that's why I'm big on Joshua Kelly because of that, especially in Dynasty. I think that guy landed in a really great spot.
Yeah, I've grabbed a fair share of Kelly in my rookie drafts. So let's move on to some running backs. James Conner currently going at ADP of 98, running back 31. Do you think his injury stuff is scaring people off too much? Are McFarland, Snell, and Samuels really that big a threat to his workload?
No, they aren't. Look, we know what we know. I mean, Mike Tomlin has a really good history with this, and we can go back to the Willie Parker, I'm going to run the wheels off him comment, and then he did, and he will every chance he gets. The question is, does Connor's health allow that? And based on the photos I was seeing today, I don't think anything's stopping him. Hell, except the drug test, maybe. But right. I joke. I think he's turned it into a value for me. I'm not super keen on him for some of the reasons that everyone else is not keen on him. But I think a lot of it is just, is he durable enough? Can he handle that workload? I think I try to be an injury agnostic. I talk about this a lot every season, which is why I endlessly can't let go of Tyler Eifert. It's going to happen, But I think in Connor's case, it's probably more likely that he will stay healthy perhaps than even Tyler Eifert. Imagine that. Who would have known? But,
Right.
I do think he's in a good position. I know my friend Sigmund Bloom, a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan, is not keen on McFarland, does not think highly of him as a potential replacement. So I think a lot of people see McFarland like this is a great landing spot for him. At some point when the wheels have been run off, Connor, whenever that happens, maybe he's in a good spot. And, Mike Tomlin's been talking up Snell. But I think as long as Connor's healthy, there is nothing in his way of a full workload. So I do like that at the price he's at right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people put on that McFarland versus Ohio State tape, and they're like, how can this guy not take the job? And as an Ohio State fan, that was a painful game.
Yeah, he looks good. I want to go back to the Colts really quick. You guys were talking about Austin Eckler and obviously everything he was able to do with Phillip Rivers. Do you guys think Nyheim Hines could kind of step up into that role with the Colts? I mean, I love Jonathan Taylor as much as the next person, but he does struggle a little bit in the receiving game. Probably the best pure runner coming out this year, but struggles a little bit in the receiving game. So could we possibly see that step up in Hines instead of Campbell?
It's entirely possible. I mean, maybe that's more likely than Campbell turning into that guy, that kind of crutch for Rivers lean on. I just don't know how much he's going to be on the field. So I have not been investing heavily in Hines at this point, or Marlon Mack. I think probably I'm, have a blind spot to that because of my Taylor infatuation. And maybe at some point that wears off a little bit when we actually see these guys on the ground. But I don't know that I expect someone to jump in and turn into that as much as I am a firm believer in the reincarnation, as Frank Coyle, the old draft guy, called it, the Hindu theory. This guy is the second coming of that guy. That was his big thing as a draft analyst. And we love doing that still, with incoming rookies. Yeah, he's going to be this guy. I don't know that anyone's going to turn into the Austin Eckler. But I think if someone did, for me, it would be Hines. I'm just not investing in that yet.
So Jonathan Taylor caught 20 more passes than Melvin Gordon in college. So do we really believe that Taylor isn't as good a receiver, or is it just the lack of opportunity? I mean, Gordon turned into a decent receiver in the pros.
Oh, last year, the guy that you and I talked about, Leonard Fournette, turned into a pretty good receiver. I don't think he turned into that. I just think the opportunities came, right? And I think for all these guys, you'll see it a lot. They're just not in offenses that require them to be the receiving guy. And, look, for Fournette, maybe that train has left the station with Chris Thompson there and his familiarity with Jay Gruden. But maybe the touchdowns come back, and maybe we're all getting a great deal on Fournette as well. But I think those are the, I do think that's something we tend to focus on is the numbers. And the numbers I'm focusing on are those 2,000-yard seasons, that speed, and that size. I like those numbers more than I like the pass catching ability. And because I think possibly he says he catches the ball damn well. They all say that, so I'm not going to just go overboard on that. But I do think maybe with some opportunities, we'll see a little more of them than what we saw in school. So
the guys going right in front of Connor, we know we've heard your affinity for Chris Carson, so we'll skip over him. But Kerryon Johnson, Damian Williams, and David Montgomery. You taking Connor over any of those guys?
Yeah, probably most of them. Again, it's about the path to workload for me. And I think all those guys have issues that they're going to have to deal with. Kerryon, whether it's DeAndre Swift, Damian Williams, obviously at some point, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to, and we keep thinking back to, look what Kareem Hunt did, but it took an injury to Spencer Ware for him to get his opportunity, but he went nuts with it. So I think we all like Edwards-Helaire just because the comparisons we're hearing, the way the Chiefs are talking, seems like a great fit for that offense. So Damian Williams, a career journeyman, I'm not eager to get him. I might be okay with it. And I think Montgomery, maybe again a guy with a clearer path to workload that I'd probably be more interested in than those other guys. But for the most part, I think Connor I like better than all of them.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe Montgomery, but I have a soft spot for Montgomery. He's my Tyler Eifert, I guess.
Sad. It happens, man. It happens to all of us.
So Connor's going ahead of Darius Geis, Malcolm Brown, David Johnson, and Kareem Hunt, and Darrell Henderson. Are you taking Connor over all those guys?
I might have a thing for David Johnson again. That path to workload. Are you rolling the dice that he can turn back into the guy that we saw a couple years back? It's entirely possible. There were moments last year where he looked okay, and the year before that, I don't know how much of that was his fault, as it was Mike McCoy's fault, and just poor offensive line. You can only run into the center's butt so many times before it's time to figure something else out. And it just seems like they didn't do that in Arizona. So, and I think that's a big thing with the coaching staff. So I looked at, one of the things I loved about Joe Mixon was the way Zach Taylor made adjustments over the course of the season when they weren't getting the blocking for him. And they started, running different types of plays to him, little quick pitches and getting him off tackle and places where he could do a little damage. And maybe DeAndre Hopkins' claims to the contrary notwithstanding, Bill O'Brien can figure this out, how to make some use of David Johnson. Look, the running backs there have gotten heavy usage and have been serviceable in the past, even guys that maybe don't have the talent of David Johnson or the talent that David Johnson once had. And I'm willing to gamble on that. I don't know if I'm willing to gamble more. It's pretty close between those guys for me, I think.
Yeah, well, Graham Barfield was tweeting earlier talking about the first 6 games of last season for David Johnson, where he looked pretty quick. He was healthy, and then he got injured, and you just keep everybody just keeps showing that GIF of Johnson on that sweep to the left, and he just looks so slow and so heavy after coming back, and that seems to play on repeat. I can't see David Johnson maybe having a comeback.
I can too, and so I'm willing to invest in some of that. I think Connor and him are both priced correctly. I like Darius Geis more than the world, I think. So I'm a little ahead on that. I just think, and I totally agree with what Darius Geis said. So far, he's been the best practice player in the NFL. And for brief moments, he's been a pretty damn good player on Sundays. So I'm willing to take a chance on that. I know there's a ton of backs in Washington right now. Maybe so many that I can't name them all. I probably could, but nobody would know them all. So, I like him a little bit, but I'm still finding it hard to ignore Adrian Peterson, the points he's still available in best ball. And so, as much as I like Geis, I'm a little less confident, but I'm willing to roll the dice.
So I have a super flex trade. I have Geis sitting in my box right now. I give up Darius Geis. I get Tyrod Taylor and Brandon Ayuk. Keep Geis.
I'm probably keeping Geis.
Yeah, I know.
I think if Ayuk was in maybe a pass heavier offense,
that's exactly my thoughts. Yeah. And I don't think Taylor would be my third quarterback. By the time I need him, the bye weeks later in the season, I don't believe he's going to be the starter.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those deals where you look at it and go, well, it's not an unfair offer. It seems like fair value. I just want to keep my guy.
Yep, I'm with you there. Matt Fox, say something to me so I can hear you now. See if you're there. I feel like I shut you down.
Well, it says it's working.
I hear nothing.
Do you guys
hear?
Damn it!
Yeah,
I hear.
I don't know why. I don't know.
Do you hear Bob, Matt?
Do you guys hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah, I can hear Bob.
This happened with Mark too, and we had him on because remember, and then it was me. He couldn't hear me for some reason. We had Mark Donaldson.
Yeah, he can hear you.
I did one last night where it was a similar situation. There was one I could not hear. I don't know why.
Well, maybe your AirPods can only handle 3.
I just thought my computer was lying to me when it said it was working.
No, yeah, we can hear you. Like I said, it may be something with this because when we had Mark on, it was the same thing. He could hear Dennis and Matt, but he couldn't hear me at all. And so I was just sitting there talking to the air. But Dennis, you had one more question for the tight ends before we get ready to wrap this up. Yeah.
So we touched on Hooper a little bit earlier. Austin Hooper's going at the ADP of 81. Right after him are Engram and Waller at 86 and 88. We're not taking Hooper over Engram and Waller, even with Engram's injury history.
God, no. Not even.
If we get to this position, are we taking Engram or Waller, or are we going to wait and take a tight end later? Even
I might take a tight end later. Look, I have no problem with Waller. I think he's going to be pretty good. Obviously, they've added some components, and maybe he's not going to get that level of targets, but he's still going to be a pretty big part of that offense. I think part of that was, at least part of that was by design, and maybe only part of it was Antonio Brown's feet and other things. So, but there's a lot. So it feels like tight end has always been the desolate wasteland, where if I don't get one of the top 5 guys, I'm doomed for life. I don't feel like that this year. I feel like you can go all the way down, Hunter Henry, Jared Cook, Tyler Higbee. And, maybe you're taking a little chance there, but I'm willing to take it. He's starting to go a little higher than I want. But Mike Gesicki was a guy. Another, there seems like an awful lot of Dolphins in my list of guys that I'm okay with all of a sudden that I wouldn't have normally been. But even Dallas Goedert, I mean, I could go down that far, and at least feel like he's going to be part of the offense. So I just think and Gronk, I mean, that guy is supposedly be really good or whatever. I don't know. But I do think that I think we're getting a little overboard on maybe on the Austin Hooper, and it's something we see every year, and the grass is not always greener on the other side. There's more money, but there's something that got you all that money, and some of the things that got Austin Hooper all that money were Dirk Cutter and Matt Ryan and his relationship with Matt Ryan, which he built over repeated off seasons, staying at his house and working with him diligently, all those things. So, and the targets rose every year. I don't know that the targets are going to rise. They added tight in the draft. They have a guy named David Njoku there that's no longer in the doghouse. So I feel like, whatever I'm paying for Hooper, I feel like it might be too much. And again, one of those guys that, if somebody makes out and wins a title because they had him and I didn't, I will shake their hands and wait till they turn their back before I try to stab them.
Right. So what do you think? Have you heard, do you know who Donald Parham is?
No. Who is that?
Well, he's out of Stetson. Was you not USFL Arena XFL XFL darling, 6'8", 240 pound tight end, 4'6" guy. He's with the Chargers.
Right.
So originally, I think he signed with Detroit as a free agent, then was in Washington, then the XFL. He's one of those guys I've got an unhealthy.
He had like at least one huge game that while the XFL was still on, right?
He did.
He was all over the field. One of those guys that you're going, oh hell, what is that? Where did that come from? But yeah, I recall him now. I'm probably still going for Hunter Henry. Sorry.
Well, I have some shares of Parham stashed on taxi squads, and he's one of these guys. He did what he reminds me of Harold Carmichael, and so I'm sitting here. He's going to sit on my taxi squad for the next couple of years, and I just want to see what's going to happen with him. It's unnatural. I probably should cut him, but
I think Dan Arnold's going to be that guy for me.
Okay.
In Arizona. Yeah, that's going to be my guy sitting at the bottom of my roster waiting for stardom to arrive.
Well, they'll run him in 4 wide receiver sets as their 4th wide receiver, won't they?
Yeah.
And he's different than their other wide receivers. So I think there'll be a spot for him there. Tall, big.
Yeah.
Mine's
and Chris
Hill.
Herndon isn't a sleeper anymore, I guess. So I don't know. He'll never show up.
Matt wanted us to say that his is Taysom Hill. He's a big Taysom Hill guy.
And he qualifies as a tight end now.
I'm waiting for this. I'm in a 2-quarterback league. Scott Barrett has a league that is like brutally cutthroat, miserable. It has a lot of big names in it, and I'll sound like a name dropper if I drop them all. But it's everybody you could imagine. Barry,
we're going to be dropping your name just as soon as this show is over, Bob.
Yeah, so you go ahead and drop it.
We're already doing it on Twitter.
In this draft, it was a 2-quarterback dynasty. I drafted Andrew Luck and Drew Brees as my quarterbacks last year. Obviously, that didn't go extremely well. And so, but while I was away on vacation, I had Dempsey drafting for me. And I'm thinking, man, I need a solid backup. And he drafts Taysom Hill. And I'm going, what the hell are you doing? Trust me, he says. Right now, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Although I own like 2/3 of the quarterback in the league in this league because I'm going to fight last year's war until I win it. I'm not going to be quarterback poor ever again as long as I live.
Before I ask you about the wide receiver duos, I want to jump back on the Hooper thing because I do agree with you, and it's something that you pointed out earlier about Stefanski and the way you think he's going to use Nick Chubb. I actually think that's the biggest reason why Hooper is not going to be as good in fantasy.
Right.
Stefanski has come out and said that they love how well he blocks. And if you've watched Minnesota games, which obviously you have with what you were just talking about, they use those 2 tight end sets to help the outside run zone. So I do think I'm with you guys 100%. Hooper, he's getting sold as that bill of goods because you got Baker there. They think he's going to be the one highest paid tight end, but I'm with you. I don't think he's going to do nearly what he did in Atlanta. So who are your top 5 fantasy duos at wide receiver? We've seen, over a couple years, Kirk Cousins had Diggs and Thielen that both produce as high-end wide receivers. Obviously last year with Godwin and Evans. Who do you think in 2020 could be 5 wide receiver sets, duo sets that could both be, whether it's both wide receiver 1s or a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 2 for fantasy?
Well, Jones and Ridley, Godwin, Evans, and I might have said them backwards, but maybe I didn't. I think Amari Cooper and somebody, probably CeeDee Lamb, and I'm not like
cuts
John
you right
rookies,
in your heart.
but it's him and somebody. I think are going to have big games. I guess I don't know if this is kind of like a non-sexy one, but Cooper and Woods. I mean, I'm not sure Josh Reynolds is going to come in and usurp a bunch of targets, and those guys are just, I think they'll have some really solid games for us over the course of time. Beyond that, I don't want to go to the Diggs John Brown thing, but John Brown is like another of my many Achilles heels in this game. When you can run past everybody on the field at any given time, I like that an awful lot. And maybe Josh Allen can figure out where the broad side of that barn is and make use of both Diggs and Brown. There's a ton of duos, I think, this year. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, I think, are going to be really good, and maybe at the cost to Chris Carson. Maybe the Seahawks will actually throw a little more. I don't think it'll be a ton more, but I think both those guys are huge playmakers and will be difference makers in fantasy for people.
Don't discount Cole Beasley in Buffalo. It's Diggs and Beasley, not Diggs.
I
and
never
Brown.
Discount Cole Beasley. Stop it.
You were talking about how you expect a kind of resurgence from Big Ben and Juju Smith-Schuster this year. Is there another wide receiver that you see who could jump up as that wide receiver to me? Everybody's talking about Deontay Johnson right now. James Washington, everybody's been hoping could break out. Is there a guy you could see taking that step forward?
It seems like Deontay Johnson is the guy. I haven't seen enough of James Washington to have a lot of confidence in. I think still a little optimism of the unknown. That's a great thing I love in fantasy. I don't know how bad he sucks yet, and maybe that's where Deontay Johnson's at. But that's kind of a good thing, right? I mean, and especially with Big Ben coming back, I think there's a lot of hope. And look at Eric Ebron's another one of those tight ends. If we're talking about a guy, especially in best ball, coming into maybe a really good situation, I'm not saying he'll duplicate that that touchdown run he had in Indy, but certainly it's not outside the realm of possibility given that offense and Big Ben being back. All of this hinges on Big Ben not fraying that elbow immediately.
Right. Yeah. All right, so before we get out of here, give us a buy low for you at wide receiver and running back for the 2020 season.
I think I wrote some down. I should probably look at them before I say something.
Just wing it, Bob. Just wing it.
Any
That's what I've been
Brown
doing
that you
all
can
along.
think of.
So buy low at running back is a guy that I promised myself I would never draft again, which is why he's my buy low. Sony Michel, right? It was a horribly disappointing season last year, but what are the Patriots going to do? And maybe there were some reasons why he wasn't good. You look at the injuries. The rookie offensive lineman was Isaiah Wynn, was hurt early last year. The fullback, they lost their fullback early on, so they've gone out and gotten the new fullback. And I'm not really sure that they're going to have Tom Brady back, is what I understand. So maybe they'll have to figure out another way. Have a really good defense, maybe a strong rushing game. A little worried about Damian Harris, but at the price point, I think it's a fair buy. And the guy we talked about already, Preston Williams, I think is a guy I'm willing to take a roll the dice on late in drafts. There are a handful of guys I like, but those two probably stand out the most.
Well, and the Patriots did add 2 new tight ends to get that additional blocking in there. So,
yeah, I think it's going to help. And look, I mean, I think about the usage as a rookie, how he just, once we hit November that season, he was they hardly took the ball out of his hands. And you could imagine a similar approach, especially with a really good defense. It makes sense. So just given the price, I think I'm off I'll never touch him again. Not even with Matt Fox's 10-foot pole. Nope, he's all mine this year.
Well, you got to think that offensive line is going to be healthy as well now too, so that just adds even more in there for him.
So we're getting ready to wrap up, Bob. But before you go, I know you're a big metalhead like I am. What band made you go, I want to play guitar?
God, how many of them were there? Slayer, Metallica. Probably started with Metallica. But I mean, just everybody. And honestly, I was a drummer. I started playing drums when I was about 10.
Okay.
And
my 9-year-old just asked
album
for a drum set.
Yeah, I found a Black Sabbath album when I was about 12 or 13, and it was all over. So the guitar was something that came along, just from sitting in band rooms and through osmosis when they're making you sit on your sticks while they're tuning up and things like that. So eventually got into guitar. So it's kind of like the second choice, but I do enjoy it immensely. And I haven't played as much in recent years, but there's been times where I play a hell of a lot.
Yeah, my 15-year-old took up guitar over Christmas break last year. The first song he decided to learn was is it One by Metallica? Oh, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica.
That works.
I said,
you might have
he might have been a little aggressive. Like maybe you could pick something a little less technically difficult for your first song.
Yeah, I think when I first really started, getting serious about, thinking, man, I'll just play guitar a little more just because I enjoyed it, was like, I think I learned Peace of Mind like in about 3 days, over the course of about 3 days. So it was probably early 80s, I guess 83, 84, when I really started playing a fair amount. And then I started, figuring out everything else. And it was, and it's a good time. I enjoy playing immensely. There's got to be a way to relax. Yeah. And by the way, I just want to say that there was some, if you wanted some sell high, I think DeAndre Hopkins, mostly guys going to new teams, and Aaron Jones is another one, because he should be everyone's sell high, because he's probably not going to score those 19 touchdowns. And a guy that's maybe not on everybody's list, I just, AJ Brown is a phenomenal playmaker, and I think he's capable of having the kind of year he had last year, but by design, that's not what they want to happen.
All right, Bob, again, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to jump on with us and everything. Tell all our listeners where they can get all of your magazines, hear your takes, everything, everywhere they can find you.
So it's a weird year. We're going to have one magazine this year instead of 5. We'll have the Pro Forecast. It'll be on newsstands everywhere, like they always are. And you can also get it online at footballdiehards.com. You can order it early, and it'll come delivered to you like everything else we get now is. And it always has been, but that's a great way to get it. The website is footballdiehards.com. You can hear me on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Right now, Saturday nights, as the season draws near, we'll go to daily. And once the season starts, I'll be on 7 days a week. There will be no escaping me. So steel yourself, people. And you can find me on the Twitterverse at footballdiehard.
And when the season hits, it's the definition of grinding.
Yeah, I love it. I don't know. I don't know how to do otherwise. It's been a number of years of this. So.
Right on.
So yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Bob. I've had a blast, and I love to listen to you talk about fantasy football.
I appreciate you guys having me and listening to me, and I'm sorry I shut down Matt Fox. I feel really bad about it.
That's all right. I hear your dulcet tones on XM every day.
I see your lips moving. I hear nothing.
He said he listens to your dulcet tones on SiriusXM.
Then that's a horrible thought. Okay. Yeah. Dempsey is the one with the dulcet tones. I'm the gravelly voiced one who chimes in with the overexcited exclamations.
You're the one whose voice is memorable.
Yeah,
that's a kind assessment. I appreciate it.
Right on.